Rama Madana Mohana.
So, spiritual sound, what is it and how does it work? So the first in Sanskrit, in the Vedas, it is referred to as Sabdha Brahma. Sabdha Brahma means spiritual sound. But what is spiritual? How do we define what is spiritual? People have so many ideas on what spiritual is or spirituality. We were talking about this a little earlier, a little group discussion that we had. You know, it wasn't so long ago people thought that dealing with ghosts and what they call spirits, that was spiritual. Other people think, I saw this thing, I saw somebody speaking on television. This person was saying, "Oh, I'm really into nature. I love nature. Everything. I feel so connected to nature. I'm a very spiritual person." And it may be shocking to some people, and I'm not saying this at all to criticize anyone, but feeling close to nature doesn't make you spiritual. Nature or material nature, this world, is by nature. Its nature is that it is material. It is material energy. So having an affinity for it, feeling very close to it, doesn't make you spiritual. It maybe makes you a more elevated person, somebody that is more gentle and perhaps compassionate and interested in higher things, but being into nature itself doesn't make you spiritual. Something being spiritual means it has completely different characteristics than anything that's related to this world. One of the natures or characteristics of this world and things connected to this world is the fact that everything is temporary, everything is passing, and everything by nature is also limited. It is not unlimited, strictly limited. When we speak of spiritual, we are talking of that which is necessarily eternal, and that which is without limitation. But of course there are many other characteristics. But when we speak of spiritual sound, we are not speaking of material. You know, in the Vedas, it's really interesting. They say sound, just as a general term, can have two effects. It can entangle you in the world, which of course leads to more suffering and difficulty, or it can liberate you. For it to liberate you, it must have a spiritual nature. Spiritual sound is liberating. Material sound is entangling and produces unhappiness. In this world, you know, we use sound to communicate. But all it is just a sound that, you know, hits you in the eardrum and produces a certain vibration which is translated into electronic impulses that stimulate part of the brain. From the yoga process, there is an intimate connection between the mind and the brain. They are not the same, and the mind is not produced by the brain. It is not a function of the brain. It is a separate energy. It is a very subtle covering of the living being. And so this sound from the yoga process, it describes how, you will have this reaction in your brain, and it transfers an impression to the mind. And we associate objects with certain kinds of sounds. If I say mango, what do you think of? Everybody has a picture of a mango in their mind. Hopefully, we know what a mango is. We have a picture of banana. We've got a picture of a banana in our mind. The sound or the name is different than the object. The sound represents the object. And so when we hear a sound, that sets off some sort of recollection or some sort of identification with something that we've encountered or heard of or whatever. But the sound is actually just hollow. It's just a sound. There's nothing contained within it. We are the ones that give it meaning. By our language, we give particular sounds meaning. We associate them with certain things. Spiritual sound is not like that. With material sound, for instance, mango, mango's really nice fruit, but I can sit there and close my eyes and even think about it, or just say mango, 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 mango. I can keep saying it. It doesn't make it so I experience what is a mango. I don't experience the reality of any mango. They're just empty words. They're just sounds that represent something. There's nothing contained within them. Spiritual sound is not like that. Spiritual sound is incredibly potent. It contains an actual spiritual reality. So I just made a note here I'll just refer to 1 second. So the characteristic of spiritual sound is that it actually does have potency. And as I mentioned before, one of the things that spiritual sound can do is to liberate us from the material condition. It can actually make it so that we can taste spiritual sweetness, the thing that we always hanker for. I've mentioned in the past that we all have an affinity or an attraction for happiness. We want to experience happiness. We try to experience happiness. We unfortunately connect or associate sensual stimulation with happiness, but there's actually no connection. You can eat massive amounts of food, you can hear tons of ordinary music, you can receive all kinds of physical stimulation, but it doesn't actually deliver happiness. You can be completely absorbed in material activity and be utterly miserable. You can have incredible amounts of sensual stimulation and be very unhappy, even suicidal. Spiritual sound, though, does have this capacity, this characteristic, where it can give us a taste of what it is that we've always been hankering for. Spiritual sound is full of potency and is accepted as being non-different from the original cause or the supreme soul. And because of that, when we engage in this process of hearing and then chanting this spiritual sound, we are in fact directly associating with that which is of the highest spiritual reality. We are directly associating, directly connecting with that. You know, I've traveled all over the world and taught meditation and spoken at different events and functions, and it's like so amazing. From east to west, north to south, everywhere, people experience the same thing when they are introduced to this transcendental sound or spiritual sound. There is this instant lightening of the load in our heart. There can be even a direct experience of great spiritual happiness. I've seen in every country that I've been where I've taught this and engaged in this, you even see some people, the first time they hear it, they begin to cry. And they don't know what's going on. It's like, not only is my heart lightened, but I'm experiencing a form of happiness. It's like, you know what? I've been wandering in the desert for decades, and now I've come home. I've arrived home again. There is that feeling of familiarity. So when we place ourselves in the proximity of actual spiritual sound, it has this effect on us. It is a purifying effect, an effect that begins to clear and cleanse the heart and the mind of all the things that have, the cobwebs and the dirt that has gathered there over so many years of association with the material world. It begins to clear this away. It is like light that comes into a dark room where everything is closed and you crack the door open a little and a beam of light shines into this dark place. This is the experience that one will often have in connection with this spiritual sound or transcendental sound. Because of the spiritual nature of this sound, it is not a material object. It cannot be bought or sold. I mean, I was so saddened when I heard Radhadasi was telling me some woman was speaking with her and she was very unhappy and looking for happiness in her life, and someone was advertising themselves as a spiritual teacher and sold her a mantra. I think it was for $1,000. And it was like, what? And it points to two things. One is I don't want to use the word desperation, but the fact that many people are so unhappy in their lives and they want to they want relief from the unhappiness or the fear or the anxiety, the anxiousness that we experience, and they're looking for relief from these things and to find something of true, something that is good, something that is pure, something that is transcendently awesome. And they're willing to spend money for it. But unfortunately, not only can money not buy you love, it cannot buy you a spiritual sound. It cannot be purchased with money. The Vedas describe that this spiritual sound actually descends from another place, a spiritual atmosphere, a transcendental atmosphere. And the way in which it enters this world is through the great spiritual teachers who are intimately connected with that spiritual world. It is like, in India, I've mentioned before, in the old days, you used to see when people would pick mangoes. I mean, sometimes a mango tree is like huge. Here we are with the mango thing again. Like really huge. And to reach the mangoes, they would often send a bunch of younger guys or some men up a tree. And somebody would harvest the nearly ripe fruit on the top and pass it to the one below them, and they would pass it to the one below them, and it would arrive on the ground and be placed in a basket. And this way it is delivered from the top of the tree down to the ground where it is accessible to all. And this example is actually used because it is a very similar process by which the great spiritual teachers pass down this spiritual sound. And it is through this process that we are able to receive it, we are able to bathe in the nectarine beauty of this sound, and we are able to pass it on to others. And as I mentioned earlier, that it's like, the sun. The sun is purifying. You hang something smelly outside in the sun. Your husband's socks. And you leave it in the sun long enough, and not only does the wet laundry become dry, it has this freshness and niceness to it. Things have become purified by the effects of the sun. In exactly the same way, when we expose ourselves to the brilliant spiritual rays of this transcendental sound, this spiritual sound, it similarly has an effect upon our own hearts and minds, an effect of both purifying us and enlivening us. But it delivers something more than just a feel-good experience. It actually brings about enlightenment. Just like when you are in a fog, and the fog is really bad, what is it that dissipates fog? Sunlight. When the sun is up and shining very brightly and is hot, it soon begins to thin out the fog, and the fog dissipates and leaves. In a similar manner, we are covered by material conditioning, material consciousness. We are far from our real and eternal spiritual home. We are out of touch with who we are as spiritual beings. We're totally absorbed in the idea that this body is me, and that I will find the happiness and the love I seek through this body alone. No, that is not true. That is not real. And just as the fog dissipates because of the sun, in exactly the same way, the rays of the spiritual sound dissipates the ignorance and the fog that covers us, so that we begin to be able to see things differently. Enlightenment will mean that the way in which we see ourselves, the way in which we see others and relate to them, the way in which we will see the world and relate to the world, will be completely different. It will be on the basis of compassion, on the basis of wisdom, on the basis of great kindness, on the basis of love. And this can only happen when the ignorance of material existence is dissipated. So when we take this spiritual sound that has been handed down to us through a very long and illustrious lineage of great spiritual teachers for thousands of years. When we take this sound and make this the focus of our meditation, we take shelter in this sound. Then our heart is purified, we feel enlivened, spiritual experience begins to deepen and grow. We can come to the point of true spiritual enlightenment. Okay? Thank you very much. people.